Okay, and we are live. I'm here with Mitch Brisker, who has been making waves around the world right now because he's featured in a fantastic article in the Daily Mail. He's been on this channel before. The Daily Mail tried to claim it was a complete exclusive, but he's already spoken to me and I think Aaron and others in this sort of community as well, and it's been a pleasure to talk to him. We're going to be talking about Tom Cruise and how he became this abusive kind of person from where he started from. Mitch, why don't you give us a little rundown about your channel at the moment and what we're going to be talking about today?
Well, essentially, the name of my channel is Scientology, The Big Lie. It's the title of a book that I have coming out actually next week on Amazon. And hopefully I'll be publishing it in the UK and Australia as well, so we can cover the English-speaking world. It's essentially why I came onto YouTube was to promote a book. And YouTube's a funny thing. You know, once you show your face, people want to hear about all kinds of different things. So I'm sure you can understand. Yeah, so it's Scientology, The Big Lie. There's dashes in between each of those words, or you can just look up Scientology, The Big Lie, at Scientology, The Big Lie. You'll find it. Search my name, Mitch Brisker, on YouTube. You'll find it. I've kind of become very present. Okay, let's do this.
Yes, let's do this. Well, I should just say you don't have to search it, people, because the link to the channel, to Mitch's channel, is right below. So you can click on that and go and subscribe and hit enable notifications so you know whenever he posts, and help Mitch out with this, like you help all of us, because these people give all of their time and have some amazing experiences to talk about. And I'm going to ask you afterwards and get the link for the book and put that beneath as well, because we should have that. So we're going to get into Tom Cruise, right? You were about as close and personal as anybody who's left Scientology so far has been to both Tom Cruise and David Miscavige, I think, in terms of just being there. What was it that I think you want to get to the heart of today with regards to Tom Cruise?
Well, yeah, when I consider Tom Cruise in 1990, when I first met him, when he first came up to the international base, we were living in like adjacent cottages that were, provided for VIPs or whatever. I was up there hired as a pro filmmaker. I didn't really consider how long I was going to be there. I thought it was just for one project. And then Tom came up and, just observing him and then thinking about how he got into Scientology as a vulnerable, young, rising, up and coming actor who had then, had this friendship engineered by David Miscavige, who sort of, once he found out that this guy was in Scientology, he kind of killed off everybody around him. He kind of disintegrated his social structure. Engineered his divorce with Mimi Rogers, and engineered his marriage with Nicole Kidman before he then later destroyed that one. But I saw this sort of blooming friendship, which was Tom becoming falling into Dave's bubble and into sort of his clutches, if you know what I mean. I mean, because I used to see those two guys ride around the base on their little dirt bikes, which is how people got around there, because it's a large property. And it was all sort of fun, and they were like boys, and it was like they'd been separated since they were children, and there was a big happy reunion. I mean, we played it like that, but, behind the scenes, Miscavige had very deliberately engineered Tom into his sphere. And then, you move forward when you consider, then the divorce with Nicole Kidman, and then there was the relationship with Penelope Cruz, which fell apart, because of her commitments to another religion. And as much as Scientology says they accept that, they're intolerant. And then you have Girlfriend Gate, with when they were looking for a girlfriend Nazanin Bonadari, and then you have obviously the Katie Mitchell fiasco. And so all of these things, they sort of led Tom, I believe, to become the abused, who was then ultimately becoming an abuser, becoming more and more like Miscavige. I think they mirror each other. They sort of become sort of like one another. Like I didn't see, when I first met Miscavige, he wasn't obsessed with wealth and celebrity. He didn't see himself as a mega celebrity the way he does now. And I just see that fascinating, to see a person make that kind of arc.
I think So David Miscavige must have been quite ambitious at the beginning, just to take the power once L. Ron Hubbard died. And my understanding was that a vacuum sort of opened up, and then Miscavige grabbed it with two hands, and so he must have been quite ambitious from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, when I first met him, I thought he engineered my arrival at the base, kind of behind the scenes. That's a whole long story. That had to do with their inability to get films done, and I was in LA working with a marketing group on a Dianetics book, and we had sold like 10 million books, and that was like in such contrast to the failures they were having that he sort of brought that whole thing, that whole endeavor up to the international base, where it just languished and was never successful again. But it's not so much that I don't think so much of vacuum. I'm not the best person to talk about that, but from my observation, it's not so much of a vacuum because Hubbard had put in place, like there was never going to be a Hubbard 2.0. You know, there was never going to be the next sort of spiritual leader. So he set up this mechanism whereby there would be layers and layers and individuals and checks and balances. So he didn't so much fill a vacuum as he dismantled a structure that had been put in place. He very carefully took it all apart, which left him in the position where nobody else, the lawyers weren't going to listen to anybody else. He was the guy. Like you could try to take him down, it wouldn't matter because he had the purse strings and he had this supposed connection to Hubbard.
I see. When you talk about the two of them going around on bikes, Miscavige and Cruz, what's the rest of the base thinking? Are people looking up and are they overawed by celebrity, or are they scared David Miscavige is going to come and punch them in the face if they don't show that they're working hard enough?
They're over the celebrity thing is celebrities are like tools to a Sea Org member in the Sea Org. A celebrity is like the only function they serve is to help get the message out. They don't look at a celebrity and think, there's a shining example of a Scientologist. They're like, no, there is a person that is going to bring attention to our group that we can exploit. Everything in Scientology is transactional. The reason it's bad for children with regular run-of-the-mill Scientologists who have kids. It's not good for the kids because the relationship between the parents and the kids tends to be transactional. You get your statistics up, you can have your allowance and some, whatever. Nobody in Scientology is just loved because they're there for who they are. It all has to do with sort of what you're doing for the group and so forth. So people were like, "Oh, that's cool. Look, there's COB," as he insisted on being called, and Tom. And they're racing around and people are kind of waving and getting out of their way, and it was kind of a joyful thing, which is why I from that I never predicted that it would just get so dark and so ugly.
Wow. So do you remember then the first times you encountered Tom Cruise and were working with him and talking with him?
Well, I never really worked. Well, that's not true that I didn't work with him, but the first time I ever interacted with him, it's funny. The first memory I have of Tom is he and Dave on their little dirt bikes racing around, and there was one time where for some reason I remember it was. They were racing along and Tom was just, he was a wheel ahead, right? And for some reason, Miscavige looked back at me and he thought that I was calling him over, right? And so he stopped in the middle of the race and he came over and he said, "What's going on?" And very nicely, right? I mean, this guy wasn't, nobody's just one thing, right? But you do get judged at the extremes. So you tend to be judged at the extremes. So if you're extremely nice or extremely horrifically violent, people are going to be more concerned about your violence. He came back to me very nice. He said, "Hey, yeah, what's going on?" And I said, "Nothing." Well, what? And he says, "Oh, I thought you called me over." And then he looked at Tom flying off into the distance. He was like, "Oh, man." And then he just gave me a funny little smile and he drove up. Like, it was okay, right? Like, things were kind of jovial and fun. And it was like, Tom's here, and oh, look, he's just landed a helicopter. He's here for the week. He would arrive. There's a big meadow out there, and he would land his helicopter in the meadow, and that was kind of like you always knew when Tom was there because it's kind of hard to miss, a helicopter. But so, yeah, I had like I had interactions with him. I would see him because we were neighbors coming and going. When he was with, what's her name, Paula Wagner, his producing partner, his previous, I took them on a tour. I was asked, he brought Paula up, um, and I took them on a tour. And, I was invited to spend 4 days on the set of War of the Worlds as kind of a, yeah, it was cool, but it wasn't sort of, I think Tom was aware of my work, and because the films, there was a lot of very embarrassing films, visual things in Scientology. Probably the two most standout were the films, the training films, which were extremely important to Scientologists, but they were horrific, which is why I was brought up to the base to start remake those films and make the ones that had never been made. And I think I think Tom was really grateful that the films became super high quality, because he's a filmmaker and they were a reflection of him, even though they're very internal. And then there's, the buildings, a lot of the churches were in these just horrifically sketchy neighborhoods, and they were like a walk up, over a bait shop or just some stupid thing. And this is one of the motivations for building all these incredible churches was Tom. So, just as an aside, a lot of people conjecture if Tom doesn't have power, like he's the number two guy, or if Miscavige got hit by a bus, Tom would take over. Nothing could be farther from the church. But what he has is influence. Miscavige has all of the control over Tom. He's 100% controlled. But then Tom has a lot of influence over Dave because of who he is, like that he would inspire this movement to build these, what they call ideal orgs. One of the first ones being in Spain, when he was dating Penelope Cruz. All of a sudden we get this, multi-million-dollar spectacular building in Spain. So, that's kind of a bit of their relationship, is power versus influence.
I've got, before we continue about Tom Cruise, I'm not bringing you a sponsor as such. It's actually just myself, a bit of work. I told Mitch just before, though he has nothing to do with it. So if anyone's angry about any of this stuff, it's nothing to do with Mitch, of course. But I actually have a new channel that is just being made called Heretics. And I'm just going to play a 45-second trailer now. I hope you can hear it. Welcome to Heretics, the channel where I mine wisdom from those who dared to defy.
It's perfectly legitimate to say, I am a man, but I feel feminine, but to then say, therefore I am a woman, is just a betrayal of language.
There's intense pressure on people to lie, and I won't do it. It's a movement that tries to destroy heretics.
The process to get here is awful. The journey out is horrific.
Why can't I be okay with being silent and subservient? Everyone else is.
How would you feel if a person of a different race moved in next door?
I spent a while with a politically correct faction of the Ku Klux Klan.
The system punishes people for wrongthink. It's heartbreaking.
Now, it's your turn. Just start watching. And then, I'm on the wrong thing here. Wait 1 second. I'm just going to show you. There's the page. And you just hit subscribe over there. There's a link below in the description next to Mitch's channel as well. And you can do this on his as well. You go subscribed, and then you want to go down to all so you get reminders for that stuff. That's my new channel. It's going to be all pre-recorded, really cool, controversial, interesting stuff.
Yeah, it looks good. It's nice to see that you picked a nice calm subject matter to deal with.
I feel like I don't have enough people angry at me, so I've got to have even more angry. You know what it was? It was that
I think it's great.
Thank you.
I just want to say I support you 100%. I get that it's real controversial and all that, but I'm really looking forward to your new channel. I think it's great. I think you're the perfect person to be doing it. Quite honestly, I am green with envy. So there you go.
Thank you so much. Well, that means a lot
You're
coming
welcome.
from you with your camera directing prowess. So thank you so much. And you know what it is that people got upset and offended if I ever mentioned those things. And those things are important to me to discuss sometimes. And I figured, you know what? People who are interested can go to the other channel, and those who are going to be maybe offended or don't want to see that kind of stuff, like that, they'll stay here. And I think it's good to separate them. So that's the idea. So yeah, people, when you're checking out Mitch's channel below and hitting subscribe and turning on that alarm reminder, do it for mine if you want to watch it. Because I've also realized you don't want subscribers who are just trying to help you out, but then won't watch your stuff, because that doesn't help. So you only really want people to come and subscribe and click that notification if they will watch it. But thank you for the kind words, Mitch. Getting back to Tom Cruise and actually continuing to talk about your directing prowess, did you feel pressure knowing that this is a guy who's working with Spielberg and some of the biggest directors in the world, and then he's coming back to film things with you?
Well, no, I never actually filmed with him. He's not involved. He was never involved in our filmmaking activities in any way whatsoever. But no, I didn't, because, the work I was doing was never going to be held up against, Spielberg's work or whatever. And, I'm not competing with anybody other than myself to, try to do better and improve. And that was such a niche activity of making the technical training films, as they're called. I occasionally I assumed Tom saw a lot of the work I did, and sometimes I would know it explicitly because Miscavige would say, "Oh, I showed that to Tom and he really liked it," which to me was a little clue as in terms of Tom's influence, because there were, Tom needed to like things for Dave to move forward with them. But it wasn't, again, it's influence, it's not control. Dave had the control. I mean, I truly believe that Tom is very siloed and knows a whole lot less than anybody thinks. I mean, look, and you might say, well, how is that possible? Because we hear so much about all the violence in Scientology, and we hear about the hole, and we hear about, people being kicked and punched and slapped and put in buckets of water, and all that's 100% true. But that was going on sometimes 30 feet away from where I was, and I didn't know it. It's that easy to keep this stuff from people. Like everybody on that base, all the Sea Org members, the Gold Staff members, they all knew about it. After the whole thing was done with and they bulldozed it over, I asked somebody for directions of where something was, and they said, just go across the street and then by where the hole used to be. It was just a reference point, right? But I'm saying that to make the point of how easy it is to keep information from people. Of course, I found out about that in 2015 when I was asked to look at a bootleg copy of Going Clear, because they wanted my involvement in terms of doing public relations to push against it, right? Which is actually a silly thing to do. But when I saw it, I was really I couldn't believe it. And I had helped to make a film, a video, a piece of intense propaganda, whitewashing gold, and talking about how wonderful it is and all these great humanitarian programs they support with their media. And I was interviewed in this thing extensively. The video's on YouTube. It's called something like The Sea Org Inside Golden Era Productions. And that video was produced within 100 yards of the hole. So they're talking about supporting human rights groups and how much they care about people. Meanwhile, within 100 yards of where the camera is, they've got like 100 people locked up in a trailer. And so I took that video when I left and started speaking out. It's on my channel. I took that video and then I did a response video to it. I put myself in a little box and whatever, and it's really interesting. It gives a lot of insight. So, but my point is, if it was that easy to keep all that information from me, how and Tom's at a much greater distance from any of that stuff. Like, I don't think there's a chance he didn't know about Nazanin scrubbing a bathroom with a toothbrush. It wasn't his idea. They'd already broken up. And that's just how they ran her after the fact. And then, of course, he would then read about it at Vanity Fair and think, the enemies of the church are publishing bad stuff. That never happened. He probably didn't even know. And that's not to say that he's not to be held accountable, because that's going on around you. You need to know that stuff, but
it's a really complicated one, because there's that fine line between perpetrator and victim, and I suppose in a sense everybody bar the head is both a perpetrator and a victim. Even people very high up, even people like Tom Cruise, he does seem by all accounts to be a true believer. At the same time, the idea that he doesn't know any of the abuses going on, that he isn't aware that just at a very basic level, Miscavige does go around just hitting people like he did to Mike Rinder, or that people get thrown into the hole. He must know some of that. And I suppose to that extent, he's complicit in the abuses of Scientology to some extent.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're 100% right. There's the effort to keep information from someone, and then there's the individual's own decision to not see it. And I know what that phenomena is because I not seen a lot of things, which I later went, wait a minute, that, if I would have just been in a different mindset, I could have seen that. So there's that sort of, it's almost like not the fog of war. Let's just call it's the fog of cult. It's the fog of cult belief that you just don't see something that's in front of your eyes. So, but I think he's aware far less than people assume. I think it's nice to speculate that he's just this 100% bad person, whatever, to engage in that kind of speculation where, he and Miscavige behind the curtain are like going, what kind of pain are we going to inflict? But it's just not that. I mean, here's a fundamental difference between these two guys. They're both very narcissistic and they tend to mirror one another. But I've seen Tom engage, you've heard the term, narcissistic philanthropy, right? There's this type of narcissist that they're philanthropic. They might be a pillar of your community. They might be the head of the Red Cross, some organization that feeds blind orphans or something, but they really do it in a very public way because the adulation they get from it helps to feed their identity because they don't have an identity. So that becomes their identity. And so Miscavige is 100% engages in philanthropic narcissism. He's not going to, do anything for anybody unless there isn't a camera crew or an audience, or unless it can be broadcast broadly to reflect on the greatness of Scientology. But I've seen Tom engage in acts of philanthropy and stay hidden in the background and take no credit for it. I remember when I went to visit them essentially I went to visit the art department on War of the Worlds because I was interested in some of the advanced techniques they were using in special effects and on the set and so forth. So I basically mostly spent 4 days with Spielberg's art department, taking pictures and talking to them. And they're just really lovely, gracious people. But one of them was telling me they were shooting out of some rural area, maybe Virginia or something, and they stopped at what do you call it? I have to give my dog a treat. I've trained my dog, so when I'm sitting here, he knows if he comes up, he gets a treat, so he'll go away and not interrupt. So they're driving in the. He's like a drug addict now. They're driving in the country, and they stop at a Dairy Queen, right? You know what a Dairy Queen is. You have anyway. In the Dairy Queen, there's some high school girls working behind the counter, and there's a basket on the counter, and they're soliciting donations for one of their schoolmates who worked with them at the Dairy Queen. She'd had a horrible car accident and was having difficulty paying her bills, and Cruz went in there, got an ice cream, whatever, and anonymously, shortly thereafter, somebody from his entourage came in there and dropped a check for $10,000 in the basket. And so he never he's not saying, hey, go get the camera crew. I got a story here. I want, he's just not like that. So I see it's like, if he's just out of the clutches of Miscavige, he just always seems to be this really nice, gracious guy. You hear what,
that's interesting, isn't it? But I'm like, I was just going to say there's two things I said, because firstly, narcissistic philanthropy is a really interesting concept, and I think it even goes as far as people like Jimmy Savile, who was the horrible man doing that. I don't want to use the words of what he was too much on YouTube, but doing those horrible things in England, and he was like that, right involved in charities and things like that. Even more than that, I think, because with him it was hiding in plain sight as well. But I think that does speak to being human, and we sometimes forget that people who join cults are humans like the rest of us, and most humans want to see themselves as good people. So it's very unlikely that Tom Cruise, as you say, walks around laughing and saying, I'm a horrible person. I'm sure he thinks everything he does is wonderful, and he does want to help out when he can with this and that. It's just, unfortunately, the ideology seems to have captured him to such an extent, as what you seem to be saying, that he's just made himself totally blind to the abuses that are going on.
Yeah, and I think if that, I tend to refer to it as a reality distortion field, which is a term that originally came out of Star Trek, and then was applied to Steve Jobs, his ability to get people to believe things just with sheer mental force and marketing and all these other things. And the Hubbard was a master of this reality distortion field, as is Miscavige, but they both added violence to it, more so Miscavige. But in addition to all of the sort of mental force that's used to overcome another person, they both add violence, which is tragic. But my point is, I think if that reality distortion field ever shut down, Tom would, he'd be confused, but he'd probably call his daughter, if that thing just shut off. I've always kind of believed that. And I don't want people to think that I don't think that he's, culpable for his own whatever. We all have to. I never punched I was not an abusive person in Scientology because I was always generally very well treated. But I made these films. I made a film literally, and I didn't even realize it. A film for instructing auditors. These are only seen inside the church. Literally about a guy. It happened to be starring Jason Begay, so I had to make the film over again after he left. But he played a guy who, it turned out, in the course of his counseling session, it comes out that he had drugged and raped his best friend's girlfriend. Assaulted his best friend's girlfriend, right? Like this is a film that Hubbard wrote to teach people how to counsel. And this guy, he so transforms that he's no longer right in the counseling session. He's laughing, he's completely recovered. And he says, I'm going to go find that girl and get her some counseling and make sure she's okay. And I'm going to find my friend and make sure they're okay. And it's all joyous and wonderful. But then, when I got some distance from it, I went, oh my God. Basically, they're reinforcing this lie that Scientology has the power to completely rehabilitate a criminal and to make the victim whole, to handle their trauma. But because it doesn't work, when you get such a massive failure like Danny Masterson, they have to cover it up. They have to protect him, but it's literally baked into the training. Like it's not. They're not trying to protect a criminal organization or criminality. They're trying to protect what they believe is the only hope for any of us to survive far into the future. So, sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent, but
not at all. Well, so Tom Cruise then, it would make sense that he would believe in a lot of this stuff. Like basically, my understanding is the overriding idea is you have the power to control your own life, and that's what Scientology teaches. It's what a lot of cults teach, and sometimes psychologists teach that. It's not always a bad thing to learn. You can control your life to an extent, as long as it's not taken too far. But when you're Tom Cruise and you've become the most famous superstar, richest, most glamorous, whatever guy in the world, it makes sense that you would believe, hey, you can do it too. Anyone can do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's sad but true. There's you brought up an interesting point. Okay, so there's this thing in Scientology, which a lot of people have heard about because of the Danny Masterson trial, which is, what did you do to pull it in, right? Yeah. We've all kind of heard this idea that a victim walks into the church and they've been abused and by fellow Scientologists, and they say, hey, I need help. I've been traumatized, and they get sat down and told, well, you must have done something either in this lifetime or another lifetime. Now, you said, some idea may be even exist in psychology, like you do it, right? It's almost like a universal idea, like you can do it all yourself. That may exist in psychology, it may exist in cults, but here's the difference, okay? If you go through some, let's say, incredibly traumatic experience that really wasn't your fault, if you ask yourself at some point, do I need to do something different? Why do I keep finding the same abusive partners? Why do I keep getting fired from my jobs? Asking yourself this, I think, can be empowering and be healing. Where the problem is when another person forces it on you and they say, well, what did you do? You get what I'm saying? It's a very devious way of gaining power of that person. And then it makes it look like this idea of self-empowerment, of really being able to look and ask yourself what you did wrong. It kind of defeats that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the difference, and that is the issue. But tell me, so here's another thing. Okay, we can say Tom Cruise might be a little bit different to the other, to the perception of him being extremely abusive and all of those things. Maybe that's true. But why is it that so many people speak so highly of John Travolta compared to Tom Cruise? So many people say, oh gosh, Tom Cruise really is not that good guy, and John Travolta is.
Well, I mean, because John's never divorced a wife and then estranged himself from his children, right? I mean, you've just never heard about John being abusive. I'm trying. Plus, John is he's culturally really important as a pop icon, and Tom isn't. If you think about it, Tom is a very handsome guy who can be with the right film show tremendous acting ability. But if Tom Cruise never made a movie, if we went back in time and prevented all the Tom Cruise movies from being made, it wouldn't really have any impact on pop culture. But if you did the same with John, it would be really different. You wouldn't have Grease, you wouldn't have Saturday Night Fever, you wouldn't have Urban Cowboy, you wouldn't have films that affected the way people dressed and the music they listened to, and potentially even their relationships. So, John he's culturally way more important than Tom. So it's easy to like him. And then you don't hear any of these stories. I mean, John has just had these tragedies. When he got into Scientology, he had just suffered through the death of his love, Diana Hyland. He met an actress on the set of The Devil's Rain, a film nobody's even heard of, an actress by the name of Joan Prather. She gave him she was a Scientologist. She gave him a Dianetics book. And brought him into Celebrity Center, and that's how he got started. And he used to be around there all the time. I was there when he came in the 80s. We were late 70s rather. We were on Celebrity Center. It was on 8th Street, right around the corner from the Hollywood Boulevard, the Walk of Fame part of Hollywood Boulevard. And he was just around. He was just a guy. He was on a TV show, but he hung out with people. He said hi to people. So he was just kind of, Tom's never done that. Tom's always come through the back door, VIP, but I mean, that was kind of engineered for him to do that. But it's a very different perception. And plus, Tom did this one thing, remember in Tropic Thunder, where he played the producer. It was kind of a Harvey Weinstein, a cross between Harvey Weinstein and David Miscavige. He played this character. He was bald and he was fat and he was loud and mean, and people loved it. They loved seeing him, I think, in that role more than they liked seeing him in Top Gun. And so John does those kinds of character parts. I mean, he's put on a dress. He's been an awkward, line dancing cowboy. He's been the guy in Grease and Saturday Night Fever. People love that. It's really endearing. Tom doesn't do that kind of work. So that very much could be it.
There have been some reports about John Travolta, just reports about, I think, more than one masseur who John did things around that was not wanted. But it just sort of got, maybe because people like John so much, that was brushed under the carpet a bit, whereas if it was Tom Cruise, that might have been a much bigger story. So are there examples then of I mean, I remember Karen de la Carrière told me a story about, I think it was that Tom Cruise had the Scientology members work all night to put flowers out for Nicole Kidman, and then I think he didn't like the flowers, so they had to work the whole day to change the flowers, and that's the kind of thing that people used to get annoyed with regards to Tom Cruise and Scientology.
Yeah, I remember when that happened. I was actually living at the base. I remember he was coming up for the weekend, and I was generally never there on weekends. I had a family in LA, and I would go to see my wife and kids. And I remember seeing them, pulling out weeds, and just a huge crowd of Sea Org members doing the planning of this thing. And I was just driving away thinking like, wow, that's so. But I don't think it was Tom who didn't like the flowers. I think it was one of these outrageous love bombing things that Miscavige did for him. right? Like he sort of made that whole thing happen. I think Tom came up and saw it, and, you know, was just like, wow, thanks. I don't think he was the one sitting there, supervising it and saying, no, less daffodils, more roses, or whatever. That's Miscavige. He's the one who obsessively micromanages everything. So,
with regards to, I gather that he had a lot of Scientologists helping him move home and doing all these kinds of things. He must be aware these guys are like not being paid. He must know that, and it's basically slave labor.
Yeah, but it's like I mean, for 28 years I like lived with these guys, and yes, it was very awkward. I didn't want that job to last more than a couple of years. I felt really awkward because I'm being paid 100 times. I don't know. I can't even calculate it. 50, more than that a week, right? And I'm living in a nice cottage, next door to the one Tom Cruise was living in. Actually, the cottage I lived in, Miscavige, it was set up for him originally while his place was being rebuilt. So it was, it was nice. I lost my train of thought. So,
I would just say that
the money,
the difference is,
of course he'd be aware of it, but I know this, Andrew, because I've experienced it myself. It's like, well, that's their decision. That's what they want to do. They want to live this life of austere service in this group. That's what they want to do. They've chosen this. You're not thinking, well, they're getting $50 a week. I remember one of the staff members said, God, you're paid so much more than us. And I think, well, hold on. I got a family of 4. I got to put some money aside for the future. I got to pay for healthcare. I got to pay for pension, because the church doesn't do anything to support its professionals that it hires. It's like, you're on your own. But I said, at the end of the week, I'm paid more than you, but you get $50 a week, but at the end of the week, you still got $10 in your pocket and I'm broke. So this was kind of the way that I would. So we know about this, but it's like, hey, that's your choice. That's what you chose to do. Nobody's making you do that. You fall into that mindset.
I suppose the difference between you and Tom Cruise in that respect, though, is that people aren't joining Scientology for you. They're joining, I imagine, a percentage of them for Tom Cruise, for his big face. And I suppose it's like those celebrities who endorsed cryptocurrency and people got into it and lost loads of money. I would think they should feel a little bit guilty. And with regards to Tom Cruise, I mean, Scientology is just as bad as any of those crypto things, or worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to have some work to do when the reality distortion machine finally falls apart and he no longer has that emotional... Sorry?
Will it?
Oh, will it fall apart? Well, it's nothing sustainable. I mean, it probably never completely, unless Miscavige really becomes so unhinged one day that he actually goes too far with his violence and kills somebody, which is, with somebody that violent. Right? I mean, what's to prevent him from, just, you're in the wrong position. You're on the roof. You're on the top terrace at the building and flag where he hangs out, and you have an argument with somebody and you give them a shove and they go over the railing. I mean, it's like there's any, it could happen when you get violent with people like that. There's always a potential that somebody's not going to survive it. Right? So we're talking about, it's not sustainable. I mean, look, take the Mormons. They had it much worse than Scientology does, because they had shoot on sight. They also had proportionately a lot of more money and a lot more power, and they had a huge army. And just like Scientology, they illegally trafficked people from Europe. Brigham Young drove them to Salt Lake City. David Miscavige is driving everybody, enticing them to come to Clearwater, where he's hoping to create such a fortified base that you'll never be able to dig it out. So he's I'm sure, I have many reasons to say that he's looked at the Mormon model, not the religion, but the history and the organization, and said, that's what you do. You get so dug in somewhere that they can never get rid of you. And I think that's what he's trying to do in Clearwater. So no, it's not sustainable, but he's going to die eventually. We all are. So in that sense, I don't know how the next iteration of the reality distortion field is going to arise.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, apart from us going to die, that's depressing. But it's an interesting thought to
Yeah,
see
sorry.
where this will go in the future. But some people are saying that my audio's gone a bit funny. Does it sound funny to you, Mitch?
No, you're okay.
Maybe then it must be something to do with the way it's being transmitted. I don't know. So sorry about that, people who are watching. I hope you can understand still. And thank you for joining us for now, and do hit that like button and everything. What was I going to ask just now? So we talked about David Miscavige's violence, and how it's amazing you think it could go so far that he might kill someone. So, I mean, how far does it go? And I remember you telling me that you didn't witness it for a long time, and then one day you suddenly did, and you were like, whoa,
Yeah. So, was there a question in that? I'm sorry, Andrew.
Just how bad is it? How regular? How what's he doing? Well, give us an image. Is he just throwing people on the floor?
Well,
I imagine they can't fight back.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, realize I haven't seen him since 2018, right? And I know that the kind of extreme violence that he engaged in when he had people in the hole and he was punching people and pushing people around and etc. I've not seen or heard about that kind of violence outside of the international base, because the international base was such a secure bubble, with all of the razor wire and the cameras and the guards, that you felt really safe. Where Miscavige is very aware of his image, and I'm sure he's aware that his violent nature has a negative effect on his image. So I'm sure he's keeping it in check, because he doesn't go to the international base anymore. In LA he works out of Scientology Media Productions or Office Services, and obviously when he's in Clearwater he works out of the Flag Building. So, but when I was working with him at Scientology Media Productions, the verbal abuse was really intense. I think that he was in check on the violence, but I mean the verbal abuse, the fat shaming and the the one particular woman who was very loyal to him and high up in the Commodore's message organization, who had pulled off some amazing projects and was a really smart person. But she happened to be from Mississippi or Alabama, so she had a Southern accent, which I thought was charming. She was a very pretty girl, but she was big. Okay, she was big frame, big bone. And I was in meetings where he just ripped her apart for she's from the South, so she's stupid, she's fat. It's just like unbelievable kind of stuff. And you feel really awkward sitting there while this is happening, because your instinct is to stand up and say, hey dude, shut up. But if you did that, your life would be just because at that point you're still believing that this is the guy who's going to get us there. Scientology is going to prevail, and what we are trying to do is really a good thing. So it's kind of the way in which you don't see what's happening in front of you.
Did anybody ever fight back when he starts? What can you do apart from just fall over?
Well, I only saw this one incident of violence, and by the time when I turned the corner and arrived there, and he had these three executives sitting on their haunches on the just blistering hot cement on a July day where it was over 100 degrees. I mean, and people were just awkwardly walking by them going to dinner. And nobody, they just wanted this intense moment to be over. I've never heard of anybody fighting back. Plus he's always surrounded by his entourage. If anybody tried to fight back, I mean, it would the best thing to do, and this is what I think is what I would do if I was being physically assaulted by him, all of my focus would be on, I'm getting the hell out of here. How am I going to do it? Right? Because if you fight back, you're just going to make it harder to get out of there. So you're probably going to sort of do the defense mechanism where you roll over and play dead, right? And then as soon as you can, you get out of there. So
they say if you do that playing dead, though, depending on who your adversary is, they might stamp on your head or something like that. So you got to be careful.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying literally play dead, but I'm saying in terms of not returning the aggression. I think who comes to mind is Jeff Hawkins, who was one of the first and one of the worst abused. And I'm going to ask Jeff about this next time I talk to him, but I'm sure in the back of his mind, he was calculating that he was going to just get the hell out of there. He wasn't thinking, how am I going to punch this guy back?
Christ,
Plus,
stuff that goes
so
on.
many
Yeah,
of
go
the
on.
Sea Org, so many of the Sea Org members, the people that I worked with, like Jeff, these are really nice people. These are genuinely idealistic people. I mean, don't forget that one of the things that Scientology does to capture people and take advantage of them, it is appeals to their idealism. So you're naturally going to get a lot of idealistic people.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got people put some questions in if you want to get some questions in, because we'll go for another 10 minutes or so. Sugar Puff is asking, is Scientology used these days to create Charles Mansons? And I think that might be in reference to something John Atack said on this show recently, which was that Charles Manson actually studied Scientology, did more hours, I think, than John did over a period of years. And he thinks that kind of intensity is what led to, in some ways, he said he doesn't blame Scientology exactly, but that can lead to that kind of intensity sometimes. What do you think?
I don't agree. That's a whole show if you want to do it. I don't agree. I think that's fringe thinking. I don't know John. I respect him. I think that's from the fringes of conspiracy theory type stuff. I mean, I know that Scientology has done a really good job of putting their books into prisons. At least there was a whole period where they were trying to, send books to prisons, and they ran this program called Criminon to try to help prisoners. It was one of these altruistic, narcissistic things where they could point to it at a big international event and say that they were working against crime. So, Charles Manson finds a Scientology book and he reads it, and then all of a sudden, Scientology's, Charles Manson's. He's a Scientologist, right? Which I don't believe this. I mean, I was in LA when that happened. I was a kid. I actually walked into a room once at a party and I confronted Charles Manson, and it was crazy. I was actually the big claim to fame. I should put it on my resume. I didn't actually meet him. It's a really weird story. This is probably a bad time to bring that up because we're trying to wind the show down.
No. I want to know.
Oh no, I was like 19 years old. I grew up in LA, and the Beach Boys were very much a local band. When I was at 15, we used to go down to a club and watch them. They were the house band, right, at this club called Pandora's Box. They played every Sunday night, and you could get in there because they didn't serve drinks. So, I mean, I used to I remember being in the restroom downstairs taking a pee next to Dennis Wilson and talking about surfing because he was the only one that surfed, right? And so for some weird reason, he lived out Dennis, who was the one who opened the doors to the kingdom for Manson and let him in, right, to have access to the celebrities that he eventually murdered. It was all Dennis Wilson's fault. He lived out in Pacific Palisades out near Brentwood in this really wonderful compound. And for some reason, a friend of my brother's got an invite to a party at Dennis Wilson's house, right? And this is a really typical thing. People have parties back then and everybody would go. And, sometimes a band like the Yardbirds would be in town and they'd play at somebody's house and we'd all go watch. It was a very open, much freer, less structured society than it is today with regards to, I think because of social media. You have a very strong caste system. You have, influencers and people who are fans and all the crazy stuff. So anyway, I ended up at this party, and on the way to the party, this guy says, "Oh, there's some weird dude living at Dennis's house," and he showed up there in a bus with a bunch of girls, right? And so then me and a friend were bopping around this house because we're like, whoa, we're at Dennis Wilson's house. This is this guy's a rock star. Let's check his pad out. Turns out he was out of town. And Charlie and the girls were just throwing a party because, they he let one of the girls live there, and then Charlie moved in, and then they did about $200,000 worth of damage, and then Dennis came home and kicked them all out. So this was while Charlie was living there. So me and my friend are bopping around the house. We walk into a bedroom, and I straight on look at this dude, and he's got steely shark eyes. Literally, Andrew, I kid you not. I had I had bumps, like the hairs in the back of my neck stood up, and this guy was so scary and creepy. And he looked at me, and you ever walk into a room and you're not supposed to be there? Everybody stops talking, and they look at you. That's what happened. And I look, and there's Tex Watson was sitting on a bureau to my right. and there was, if I saw pictures of them, I could tell you which ones they were. So, but I didn't know it was Charlie Manson. I had no idea who this person was. He was just a hippie, right?
Yeah.
So the murders happened a month later. This was like in July, and the murders happened like August. I mean, this literally, it was within a few months that they, and so it was close enough to our memory that we were all like, oh my God, that was Charlie Manson. We walked in that room that night. So that was pretty crazy. Anyway, that's just one of the nutty things that happened to me that's not in my book. But anyway, I don't believe all that. I just don't believe all that stuff. There's all these conspiracy theories about, Charlie Manson was a Scientologist. He was programmed by Scientology in cahoots with the CIA, and Elvis is back with an alien baby. I don't know. To me, that's all that ilk of stuff. It's crazy. So no, I don't think Scientology is being used to cause to make Charlie Mansons. I think there's too many idealistic people that get into it. But I know people are going to argue with me, and at the end of the day, I could be wrong. Maybe there was a whole plot to program Charlie Manson with Scientology, and it was done by the FBI, by the CIA, so that they could then say that Scientology is dangerous. Who knows?
Who knows?
I have no idea.
It goes.
But
deep,
I would
doesn't
like to meet John someday. John, if you're watching, I would love to discuss this with you, because I think he's a fascinating guy. He obviously left Scientology a long time ago, and I think a lot has happened since then. And I left, Yeah, I mean, there's only me and Rachel Hastings. We're the only ones speaking out who worked at Scientology Media Productions. I mean, everybody else is pretty much part of some sort of ancient Scientology civilization.
Well,
So-
I'll have to put you in touch with John then afterwards if you want. That might
Yeah,
be an
do
interesting
yeah, or
conversation.
just I'll send him a message.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I
you
was
should
very
do that.
much. I have a lot of respect for him, but I don't agree with everything that he says.
There's a quick thing for me from Sam Spooky Witch Hartley, who says, question off topic, Andrew, will your book be on Audible, and will you narrate? If so, please say yes. I don't know if it's going to be on Audible. It's a book about secrets called Take It to the Grave. It's out with Pan Macmillan Publishers in April the 11th, I think, and I will make a big fuss about it in a couple of months' time. And it's going to be very exciting. I will be recording audio, I believe. I haven't done it yet, but I don't know if it'll be on Audible. There will be an audio version of it. I just don't know if it's going to be on that actual platform of Audible. But you'll be able to buy or get hold of the audio version. So I hope people will enjoy that. And then I've lost the comments window here.
Yeah, well, you have a great voice, Andrew, and I will listen to it just to hear you talk.
Oh, get out of here.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very
No,
nice of you to
seriously.
say.
I mean, because I worked with voiceover talent for decades, and you definitely you have a good voice. I would have hired you to do Scientology films, to narrate.
Where were you when
Because
I was on minimum wage for 10 years?
Voice.
I couldn't find any kind of job for love nor money. And now I've got my YouTube channel. People would hire me.
Yeah.
But that's how it works, isn't it?
Yeah. You just didn't know how to promote yourself. But no, we loved British. We always were hiring British voiceover talent, and especially your age, because you want, Scientology, part of the whole propaganda is to give it a youthful, make it look cool, youthful.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm cool.
good
I would
luck
have given them
with
a
the-
cool.
Yeah,
a
you're
cool
cool.
look.
You're youthful, man. You're right in there.
I got a question here from Sarana. Is David Miscavige appearing a gentleman with the good-looking young ladies? I am curious. I think what the question might mean is he a philanderer of sorts? Is he
No,
off
that's
with women
that's
and
a-
things?
That's the weirdest thing is the Scientology. It's so sex negative as a cult. It's like really weird. It's like you look back on the Apollo days, back when Hubbard was running his little flotilla of ships, and he had these messengers, these teen and tween girls. I think you know one of them, Janice Grady, who's a wonderful person I've known forever. Her mother was the founder of Celebrity Center. Janice has a channel with Mark Fisher, Our Scientology Stories. Excuse me. And these girls, he's like, Shelley Miscavige was one of them. Annie Broker, who later became Annie Broker, was one of them. And they wore like little white hot pants, and they wore little white like go-go boots. And they wore these uniforms that were highly sexualized. And yet there's not one even Janice, I mean, she was right in there with Hubbard, fiercely loyal. She was with him and the other girls every day. Never, nobody, even the biggest Hubbard haters have said no. There was never one case of any kind of sexual philandering with any of these girls. And you look at it, the optics on it are like, oh, this guy's got a harem of teenage girls. So it's really weird. It's so sex negative. Miscavige was obsessed with exposing. If you pleasured yourself in the shower, you'd be put in front of the entire group the next day and ridiculed. I mean, this is an unbelievably puritanical, anti-family, anti-childbirth. It was always insane to me how sex negative they were. Even though Hubbard put out a policy for public Scientologists that said, none of our business. On the surface, it was whatever you want to do is none of our business, as long as nobody's being upset by it, because then we have to handle the upset. But that on the surface, that's a policy. But boy, beneath that, man, it is just, they are brutally sex negative. Makes no sense, because all these cults, there's like Keith Raniere and all these people. It's all about, the cult leader getting all the women. But
how long did NXIVM last compared to Scientology? And I wonder if that is a way you let yourself, you're not controlled.
Yeah, well, Hubbard was really smart. He understood the public relations view, and that sex can be very deleterious towards that. In other words, if people are, there's a very famous story on this flagship Apollo. There was like on New Year's Eve, there was like an orgy, and that apparently that went on a few times. And then pro-Scientology historians will say, no, that's not true. Look, here's a policy. Read this policy. This policy very clearly says what the rules are about sex on the ship. Well, he wrote that policy because sex on the ship was out of control, or he would never have had a need to write it. Yeah. So, so it's pretty silly. But that was just the kids on the ship. It was the 70s, right? It's like that was before STDs could kill you. They were just inconvenient. That was like free love days. Sex was just a way that you showed friendships. That's changed a lot. But anyway, I think I answered your question. So no, he doesn't. He's nobody's good enough for him. I mean, he's not like that at all.
I understand.
He's got his girlfriend, his assistant, and she's good enough for him.
Yeah. No, but nobody really is good enough for him. Mitch.
Yeah, but I just want to say one thing that there's been a lot of conjecture if he himself isn't somehow sexually inadequate, which is why he's so angry, because we see so little evidence of his sexuality. So okay. Sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think that's a really important point to make as well, and it's something that I think a lot of people are wondering about. But yeah, I was going to say people should go and check out your channel. It is just below. People can click it in the link of the description, and it's brilliant. And there are very few people who know as much, particularly about the recent days, because you only left just over a year ago, about Scientology. So I hope people will go over there, just click over and go and watch Mitch's videos. Go over as well, in the description is my new channel as well, called Heretics. So click on that. On both of our channels, you want to do that thing when you've got the alarm and you'll know when videos are coming out. I'm going to put out 3 of the first episodes in the next few days. So if you click that alarm button, you'll be sure to see and be there right at the beginning for the premieres and stuff. So it's going to be very exciting. Mitch, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to see you. Truly, I love coming on your channel.